Good evening, everyone. Welcome to an Education Committee of the regular board meeting. At this time, I'd like to ask if there's anybody who would like to speak to an agenda item only. So we'll be able to speak to non-agenda items at the end of the meeting. So is there anyone who would like to speak to an agenda item? Okay, then I will turn it over to Dr. McGinley.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Wanted to congratulate Dr. Kelly on the football victory on
Said with such enthusiasm.
Saturday. This is our November meeting. We have a number of important topics to cover, and one of the things that we want to begin with is an update from Gladwin Elementary School. Each month, starting last year, we would like to feature one of our schools so that everyone on the board hears the good things that are going on throughout the district. And our first guest this year is Dr. Johnson from Gladwin. So, Dr. J.
Thank you, Dr. McGinley. It's a pleasure to be here. I will begin this evening sharing with you some of the beautiful artwork created by the children at Gladwin. A special thanks to Amanda Laird, our art teacher, for putting together the slideshow and for displaying the student artwork in the lobby outside the boardroom. Amanda teaches 23 classes at Gladwin, and Honora Jackson, our supplemental art teacher, teaches 5 classes. Honora teaches 1 class at each of the grades 5 through 1st grade. Each of the art classes is 60 minutes long. We'll start with 1st grade. 1st graders worked on still life studies. They learned how to observe and study the objects carefully prior to drawing the still life. For this art project, the 1st graders used common objects like school supplies. This lesson also was integrated with a geometric shapes unit being studied in the 1st grade math classes. When I look at this artwork, I am amazed that it was created by 1st graders. Our 2nd graders have been working on perspective pumpkins. Say that many times. It was the 2nd graders' first lesson with perspective and understanding how different viewpoints impact the art. Students used overlapping and wax resist to create their fall landscape. The office staff and I were delighted to have the 2nd grade artwork on display in the office for all to see. 3rd graders studied Picasso's self-portraits. The children used guidelines and proportion to draw a self-portrait. In this process, they used math to divide each face in half and then again into quarters. After studying Picasso, the students turned their self-portrait into abstract artwork. Picasso will be one of the artists being studied all year long. Last year, our 3rd graders had an opportunity to observe some of Picasso's work at the Barns. We are hoping to plan a trip to the Barns in the spring this year as well. 4th graders learned about radial symmetry and created a foam printing plate with a symmetrical design. Next, the students used a brayer and ink to create the symmetrical patterns. This lesson was another example of a math connection and was a follow-up to a previous radial symmetry project. Finally, our 5th graders were involved in micrography self-portraits. These are really cool. The 5th graders listed 50 interests and characteristics of themselves. In their self-portrait, students were charged with making certain characteristics or interests bolder than the rest. I was happy to see books prominently displayed on one. I wonder if creating the micrography near Halloween had any impact on the inclusion of candy in the one self-portrait at the top. As you study each self-portrait, you can see some very unique interests and characteristics. Awesome, guitar, brown hair, brave. What a creative way for students to reveal their inner selves. Again, a special thanks to the Gladwin students for sharing their artwork. I love seeing their artwork on display at Gladwin and now at district office. And thanks again to Ms. Laird for bringing out the children's creativity. And now for a few areas of focus and events occurring at Gladwin. the responsive classroom approach. I think we would all agree with the belief that our teachers should use the best research-based practices to teach our children the core subjects of reading, writing, math, social studies, and science. If that is true, then shouldn't we also believe that our teachers should use the best research-based practices to teach our children social skills, which we know are critical for success in school and, most importantly, in life? One of the best approaches to teach social skills is the responsive classroom. This child-centered approach focuses on teaching students social skills throughout the school day. Personally, I've been involved with the responsive classroom since 1995. During the summer of '95, I attended a week-long workshop given by one of the responsive classroom founders, Chip Woods. I have believed in and supported the principles ever since that summer. Several years ago, some of the teachers at Gladwin and I began exploring how to implement the responsive classroom practices. We held workshops and began implementing the practices in some of our classrooms. The idea grew. More workshops and trainings were held. Other schools became interested. Now, all 6 elementary schools implement the responsive classroom approach. One of the components of the responsive classroom that continues to work well is morning meeting. Morning meeting is an integral part of our focus on meeting the holistic needs of our children at the elementary level. The morning meeting is held at each of our 6 elementary schools. The elementary schedule has 15 minutes designated for morning meeting, beginning around 9 a.m. Morning meeting consists of 4 components: the greeting, sharing, the group activity, news, and announcements. The greeting consists of each child being greeted by their teacher or classmate. Teachers and students become very creative in how the greeting occurs, sometimes even in a different language. Sharing is directed by the teacher and is often related to experiences planned for later in the day. The news and announcements are a reminder of what is planned in the child's day, helping the child become more organized. The group activity is a natural lead-in to and bridge to academic work. For example, if the class is studying multiples, the group activity might involve the students moving around the circle and counting by 2s, 3s, 5s, or 10s to provide a foundation for the concept of multiples, pre-teaching, if you will. Recently, I was in a 4th grade classroom and asked the students and teacher what they believed the benefits of morning meeting were. Several of the students commented on being able to greet their classmates and practice how to do that, such as using a specific student's name and making direct eye contact. The teacher noted that with all the curricular goals to be accomplished during the day, morning meeting offered a time to slow down, make personal contacts with each student and peers. It also offered the opportunity to learn unique things about each other, which has helped foster friendships. In relation to the Danielson framework, we surely don't want to leave that out. Morning meeting provides specific strategies on a daily basis for enhancing Domain 2, the classroom environment. So yes, the responsive classroom and its various components, including morning meeting, are an integral part of our daily goal of meeting the holistic needs of each child. Writing, a little update. At a recent staff development meeting, our 4th and 5th grade teachers worked with Andy Fishman on the Pennsylvania Writing Assessment Domain Scoring Guide. The teachers shared samples of student writing and discussed how to help students improve their focus and organization. We are planning more sessions with Andy. A discussion about what is happening at Gladwin is never complete without an enrollment update. Current enrollment at Gladwin is at 706 and growing. I recently received an email that we have 3 new students coming next week, so soon to be 709. The 4 modular classrooms our 3rd grade students are using are working very well. The teachers and students have made them the home away from home. Children invited their parents in for a tour, and the students were very proud of their classrooms and enjoyed showing off the new surroundings. And finally, the Scholastic Book Fair is being held in our library, joint effort between our librarian, Leslie Mastronardo, and the Gladwin Home and School Association. On Wednesday evening, we will be having our ice cream social, a great way to connect books and ice cream. 6 o'clock at Gladwin. Join us if you can. Thanks for the opportunity to share the Gladwin happenings.
Thank you, Jim. I wondered if you could just comment very briefly on our safety procedures at Halloween and how that went, because that was something that was unique and different this year under our new school safety practices.
Yes, this year we decided, with all the concern about safety, to change our process. So we asked our home and school to help, and what we did is we had our parents pre-register. We sent home the form for pre-registration. They let us know specifically who would be attending the Halloween party. Each of the schools, this was done consistently across all 6 schools. Each of the schools then set up tables so that as the parents and guests, grandparents and friends came in, they came to each table. Usually, I think we organized ours alphabetically. We had about 8 tables there. Parents would come up, give their name, show the ID, and then we had our staff check them in. We would give them a nice orange Halloween badge, which they wore the entire time for the parade and for any after parade activities in the building. Parents were very pleased across all schools with the pre-registration, the number of staff who were helping check parents in. We also had, Dr. McGinley was very gracious to have additional security staff there. We had them in the building. So as we moved everybody out for the parade, the security staff checked the building to make sure all was okay. And then what was nice after the parade, because many of the parents had pre-registered, they had their badge. We had security and staff at the doors. Parents were let in. Anyone who didn't have a badge simply went back to the tables and checked in. And by all accounts, and talking to all principals, the day went very smoothly. I'm not sure if you heard anything.
No, I agree. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
First of all, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions right now, comments? We always enjoy hearing what you're up to and appreciate it. So thank you very much.
It was a pleasure to share.
We enjoyed the artwork as well. Thank you.
Terrific.
So we want to move to the next item, which is the comprehensive planning process. And people have heard of this referred to as strategic planning, and I actually call it both. But the current language from the state is the comprehensive planning process that is required of all school districts. And we are in the year to work on our comprehensive plan. And we really have had a lot of internal discussions about how we can make this a meaningful planning process for the school district and for the community. And we're very interested in going beyond looking at the next 5 or 6 years, but exploring some deeper issues. Last year we had a group of people together to look at our graduation requirements, and that conversation moved to a discussion of what is it that we really value about a Lower Merion School District education, and what are the common experiences that we think all students should have. And the reason why this is a relevant question to ask at the beginning of a strategic planning process is that when we look at the next 10 years in public education and we look at the next 10 years of high school education, we think that there are opportunities for high school to become radically different than what it is today. And we think that there are many opportunities along the way for students to have a more customized and individualized learning experience. When we look at higher education and some of the practices that are in other school districts where there is more online learning than we have and hybrid courses, we really think these are issues that we need to discuss and we need to explore. So our goal is to use this process to position the district to remain an advanced district, to remain successful, to do well by all of our students in terms of preparation for college, but also to think about what opportunities might we encounter along the way, opportunities that come our way because of changes in technology, opportunities that come our way because of changes in state regulations perhaps, and how are we really cognizant of what should remain unchanged, untouched, be here forever from our point of view, and what other things could we discuss, think differently about, or perhaps channel energy in different directions. So Dr. Marseille and I have had several conversations about this. We've included some other people in that process, and we're raising it today not because there is something that we need you to do or need members of the public to do today, but we want to push the fact that this is on the horizon, and that when we come back after the new year, we are hopeful that we get the same kind of energy in the room that we had at the beginning of the school safety task force, where we have different voices and different expertise represented, and that we can be inclusive in this process, and that we can have some discussions about important issues that we face in the next few years, and then important discussions about where we think we could be in 10 years, and where we think public education is in 10 years. So with that introduction, I will turn it over to Dr. Marseille and to go through some of the details of the process. But again, we're coming back with an invitation to participate to the broader community, to the internal community, and to members of the board when we come back in January. And there are a lot of things that we're doing in the next 6 weeks to really refine the overall process.
Sure, thank you. I'll be very brief in terms of the work that we're going to be doing throughout this school year. As many of you are aware of, obviously we set out an extremely ambitious goal, our last strategic plan, highlighting some really monumental key areas that we as a district and as a community felt were the areas that the district and the community wanted to go forth. The plan, which has changed names and has changed in terms of processes from a comprehensive plan, or strategic plan, I should say, to a comprehensive plan where the state has identified very similar key areas in which they want districts to address. And obviously, the first part of that process is to have districts think more critically about who they are. And in that is a review of a district's mission, its shared values, and the thinking around the community and bringing people together to think about that process. In the new online system, it is much more of a checks and balances than it was in the previous plan. Hence the reason why we, Dr. McGinley and I have been talking about wanting to extend that and think more broadly around what education will look like 10 years from now, and can we put Lower Merion in a position to be prepared for some of those, obviously, knowns and unknowns. Part of the core foundation of this plan will have to address these particular areas that we will need to focus on as an administrative team, as a board, and as a community, looking at standards, thinking about the way in which we provide instruction, looking at our assessments, very different from the previous plan, which has a real clear focus on the idea about formative and summative assessments and its connection to standards, which is spelled out a little bit more in the language of this new comprehensive plan than it was prior to that. One of the things that's missing that the state does not necessarily require is this idea around a technology plan. And we feel very strongly about the infusion of technology. We've levied a tremendous amount of resources, both financial and human capital, and we see the benefits of that. So that's an area in which we want to continue as well. With regards to some actionable steps, and like Dr. McGinley said, we will come back in January and give a little bit more comprehensive, but we wanted to identify some key points in terms of the timeline. And myself and Doug Young and Brian Cody are going to spend 3 days in Harvard, and there's a Institute on Strategic Thinking that is being sponsored by GSE. And we're hoping that those 3 days will really help us galvanize and think more critically about how organizations strategize and think about long-term planning that we're hoping we can come back to the committees with. And obviously, there is that conversation around the fact that we have two very distinctive dates in terms of when things are due to PDE. We have a May 30th date where our special education plan is due. But in November, the entire comprehensive plan is due. So even though the entire plan is due November 30th, it's kind of pushed up in terms of making sure that we have everything in place by May 30th to address some of the goals, objectives, and requirements, and specifically the compliance part of the plan to address the special education plan. So a really quick, abridged update for you to get you thinking about where we're headed, and we obviously will continue to keep you posted. But come January, we're going to begin the process of galvanizing our community members, our teachers, and the board in some thinking about where is education headed 10 years from now, and how do we position ourselves as a district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions by the board? Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Marseille. Question in terms of what will PDE be looking for in terms of the plan that gets that's due to PDE? Will it be just general information, or will it be our comprehensive plan in its entirety?
Well, I think it's both. I think we're going to provide the compliance piece that PDE is looking for. As a progressive district, I think that following through the compliance piece will not speak to our mission and vision and our values and what we look forward to in the next 10 years. So I think that's why we wanted to continue that rich community dialogue. Yes, we can put together a very quick, comprehensive plan we can check off and do some assessment about our strengths, our weaknesses,
Right.
and submit that to PDE. But I think to continue to stay in a competitive edge and continue to prepare our students for obviously 21st century skills, we wanted to dive a little bit deeper and analyze and reflect about who we are as a district, and is this indeed the direction we'd like to go.
Great, thank you.
Are there other questions, comments? No? Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Marseille.
Thank you.
So more to come. Next, we had a really rich dialogue at the curriculum committee meeting of the board on the IB experience, and Mr. O'Brien did a great job walking through the history and the components of the program at that meeting. And so it took a lot of energy and passion on his part to share that, and we said, great report, Tom, come and do a shorter version of a really important program at an evening meeting. But we did want to make sure that this was shared with the entire board, and we did want to make sure that this was shared with the community. And certainly Tom will take time to explain things in response to questions, but we did ask him to do the hurry-up version of his presentation. So I apologize in advance for asking you to do that, but I thank you for being here tonight.
I have my stopwatch ready to go.
Okay.
Good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity to join you tonight. Let me lift this. I'll just go like this. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share some ideas with you, and I will apologize to those of you who have seen this before, because it is deja vu. Sorry. That's all right. So if it seems like deja vu, it probably is just deja vu with a little faster pace. I was asked to share a bit about the IB experience through the lens of some of the successes that the program has had. And I've also been asked to talk a bit about the possible future pathways in IB, recognizing that some of you have more intimate experience with IB than others because of your own children. I'd like to also provide a little bit of a common baseline so that everybody has somewhat of a common understanding of what the program is about. So part of what we'll be doing in terms of talking about the successes of IB will be through quantitative and qualitative information, and about future pathways in IB within the context of the diploma program that we have, and potentially within a greater context through other offerings through the International Baccalaureate Organization. This is the timeline of our experience with IB going back to 1997. To give you some context, you all very graciously hired me in 1996 as a Spanish teacher. So this has very much shaped and molded much of my experience here in Lower Merion, for which I am very thankful. A couple of highlights on the timeline. I guess our very first success was in July of 2000 when I opened up a very nice envelope that said, "Welcome aboard." And we became the 1,234th IB high school in the world, which very conveniently gave us the school code of 1234, which is also the most common PIN in the world as well. Other successes that are sort of highlighted on the timeline, more in the affective domains. If you ask an IB student what he or she most appreciates about IB, you're probably not going to get a response such as, "Oh, I love that physics class," though lots of students really do. You're more likely to hear something much more effective about, I really like the community feel of the program. I really like how our cohort works together as almost an IB family. And we do some very specific, overt things to help make that happen. This year, for the first time, we had an overnight experience with our IB juniors to sort of kickstart that at Fellowship Farm, that community building sense, because with 63 IB juniors, that community building doesn't necessarily happen as organically as it used to when we were a much smaller program. We have several evening social events to which parents and families are invited. We do an annual trip to New York with our students. We do alumni reunions to which all of our alumni are invited. We've done that twice. So we've done a variety of different things that are designed specifically to build a community. So IB in a nutshell, just to sort of frame that baseline experience. The IB program is designed to be an internationally recognized high school diploma for families that are internationally mobile. So if a family, for example, we have many families that have moved here recently from France. So if a family moves here from France and the son was going to school in France, experiencing a French education, that student would now come here and experience an American education. The idea of IB is so that that child can have a seamless transition and follow a common curriculum so that he would be able to return to France for university studies or go to wherever the next location is that family will be going to. That's the intent of the program. It's by nature interdisciplinary because it's a diploma program, and it espouses the philosophies of international mindedness, interdisciplinary connections, a focus on critical thinking and on skill development, both academic skill development and more affective time management, personal organization kinds of development. The program itself consists of 6 subjects that students experience over the course of 2 years. Those 6 subjects naturally have interdisciplinary links because all students are studying, for the most part, the same subjects concurrently. Those 6 subjects are 2-year courses. In addition to those 6 subjects, there are 3 other experiences that IB calls the core elements or the central elements. They are CAS, which stands for Creativity, Action, and Service, Theory of Knowledge, and the Extended Essay. CAS is the expectation that over the course of 2 years, students are going to spend approximately 150 hours of time doing things that engage them in activities that are creative in nature, action-oriented, and provide community service, locally defined, nationally defined, internationally defined. Theory of knowledge is an inquiry into the nature of knowledge. Ultimately, it asks questions like these. So you think you know something. What does it mean to know something? What does that mean? By what standard do you determine whether you think something is true or whether you know something is true? What are the strengths and the limitations of our sources of knowledge? Are there inherent biases in some of those sources of knowledge? That kind of exploration through the different kinds of knowledge that's available to us. The extended essay is a student's opportunity to select a topic of his or her choice and spend lots of time, about 1.5 years, working with a faculty mentor, exploring an area of his or her academic passion, or not necessarily academic passion in some way or another. We've had students write extended essays in biology, chemistry, physics, etc. We had a student last year write an extended essay in dance. We've had extended essays in world religion, social and cultural anthropology, lots and lots of different subjects. So that is the IB experience of our students. Because we attract international families, our students engage in a very engaging curriculum that has an international curriculum and international focus, and they share that experience with an international cohort of students. One of the first experiences in terms of success that we've had is the substantial growth that we've had over most notably the most recent years. This slide shows the total diploma program enrollment per cohort, and then in the blue shaded areas, the combined junior and senior combination. Clearly, the trajectory is upward, given the projected increased growth at Harriton and at the high school level in general. One would assume that those numbers may very well increase. And what we'll be talking about toward the end of my remarks is how we can deal with some of that growth in terms of the richness of opportunities that can present. Our students who choose not to pursue the diploma can select our IB electives. Our elective courses are economics, psychology, visual arts, and music. This is a record of the amount of students that have taken those elective courses, even though they chose not to pursue the diploma. So these are numbers in addition to our diploma numbers that you saw on the previous slide. And you can see that the trajectory is clearly upward, with the glaring exception of this year. And the rationale for that is this is the first year in which advanced placement psychology and advanced placement economics are offered to students. Prior to now, the only game in town for advanced psychology or economics was IB. So one would assume that the 41 students who are currently enrolled in those two AP courses probably would have opted to take IB economics or IB psychology in the absence of the AP options, which would put that number for 2013-14 into the mid-70s. So right now, 20% of our juniors and seniors are diploma program students. That is an incredible number for a comprehensive high school that offers myriad programs programs to many different kinds of learners. That we are one of the largest diploma programs in the IB world, certainly in the United States. 25.7% of our juniors and seniors are experiencing an IB curriculum in one way or another, either as diploma students or as within the elective courses. Another area of our success is our diploma rate, the rate at which students actually earn the diploma. But before talking about that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the values that underlie the admissions policy that we have. There are IB schools in the world that run very elitist programs in that they select only the cream of the crop, and nearly always they'll have a diploma acquisition rate approaching 100% because that's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's not the mechanism that we use. We very strongly believe, and we've espoused the philosophy that we are casting as wide a net as possible, encouraging students for whom IB would be a stretch to take that stretch, to take that leap of faith, knowing that there is a team of teachers and a coordinator and a team of administrators there to provide supports to help that student succeed. I believe as an educator, ethically, that is one of the beauties of the program that we have to offer. Does that mean that all of those students will ultimately earn the IB diploma? No. And if it means that we take a hit in our IB diploma acquisition rate, I'm okay with that. I think educationally, pedagogically, that is a sound payoff. That said, our diploma rates are fantastic. This slide shows the percentage of students who earn the diploma in the world, which tends to hover around 80%. And with the exception of only 1 year, 2006, we are at or above that rate. This slide shows data that IB had collected up until 2008, and whether they still collect it or not, I'm not quite sure, but they don't publish it, or if they do, I can't find it. But this is comparative data that shows how we do as an IB school in the state versus other schools in the state of Pennsylvania and schools in the United States. And clearly our diploma rate is consistently well above the US average. Another area of success that we have is with college admissions. And I'm always very careful when I share data about college admissions because I do not want to imply that it's because of the IB program that our students have been admitted to excellent schools. This slide shows you the schools that last year's graduates are currently attending, and it's very typical of the data of previous years. These students, had they been AP students, would have been fantastic students and would have gone to outstanding universities. So the goal is not to say that these students can thank IB for this. That said, it is the IB curriculum that did prepare these students for entry into universities of this stature. And I dare say, it's a bit early to predict, but I dare say, and success in these universities. It also gives you a sense of the kinds of universities that truly respect what IB does for the preparation of students for undergraduate work. Another area of our success is our ability to include students with special learning needs. Students with 504 plans and students with IEPs, students with special learning needs do participate in our program, in both the diploma program experiencing all 6 of the academic subjects as well as those 3 core elements. And we have students with 504 plans and IEPs participating as elective students in the 4 elective courses that we offer. The IB program, the IB organization does provide for testing accommodations very similar to what we provide for. I have to request them on an individual basis, and I have yet to be turned down for any requests that I've made. Another area of success, and I say success in a guarded sense because we're certainly not where we need to be as far as this is concerned, but consistent with the strategic planning goal, or should I say the comprehensive planning goal of closing the achievement gap, we are making concerted efforts to try to make this happen. I'm proud of the efforts that we've made. I'm proud of the success that we've had, albeit limited, and I look forward to greater success in this field. We have always spoken with our minority students and encouraged them to participate in classes in which minority students are typically underrepresented, whether that's AP, whether that's IB, whether that's honors classes. We have done that regularly ever since I've been employed in the school district. Probably about 3 years or so ago, I took a much more data-driven approach to target students who have demonstrated the probability of being able to succeed through standardized testing, through DRP scores, through PSSA scores, now to be Keystone scores, through other kinds of assessments, as well as reviewing the grades earned by students, as well as having very targeted conversations with counselors and with teachers and engaging families as well. And that has paid off dividends, and we have increased our minority population in the program. The gatekeeping course has tended to be Algebra 2 because up until this year, Algebra 2 has traditionally been a junior year math course. So in order to be able to access IB, where Algebra 2 is the foundation curriculum for all 3 of the IB courses, our students have had to be advanced in math. And ordinarily, when I would go through the enrollments in our Algebra 2 courses, looking specifically for minority students to be able to have conversations with, the result would be a handful of maybe 4, 5, 6 students each year. Now that, thanks to the actions of this board and thanks to the actions of our STEM program, Algebra 2 now falls squarely on the plate of the typical sophomore. And I'm happy to report that there are currently 22 African American students in Algebra 2, 6 are in Algebra 2 honors, and I look forward to having many very engaging conversations with these students and their families. This slide shows the history of our minority enrollment in the program, and you can see that our current cohort, the classes of 2014 and 15, currently combined have more students of color than all of our previous years combined. It's still not a number that's acceptable, but nonetheless, we are moving in the right direction. This slide shows the number of African American students who are not diploma students that chose to take the IB electives. You can see that with the obvious exception of this year, that trajectory has been up. Not quite sure why, other than the possible addition of psychology and economics. I don't know how many minority students are in those 2 AP courses. That may very well have contributed to our decrease this year. Another area of success, and an area that I'm very proud of, is our complete embracing of what IB calls their mother tongue entitlement. IB's philosophy is that students not only should have the opportunity, but deserve to have the right to study the literature of their native language, even if it's not the language of delivery, the language of instruction in the school. And that's done through what IB calls the school-supported self-taught Language A course. Your Language A is the language of your native fluency. The vast majority of our students take English A because it's the language of their native fluency. Through this self-taught mechanism that I run, I don't speak all these languages, believe me, but I run this component in the program, and through it you can see the wide variety of languages that our students are studying the literature of. That certainly is indicative of the cultural, the historical, the linguistic variety that we have within our program. This is also the doorway to IB's bilingual diploma, and over the course of the implementation of our program, we have conferred 33 bilingual diplomas. This slide outlines IB's approaches to teaching and approaches to learning, and it's a very philosophical statement about what education is all about. This year, for the first time, they've actually compiled a single document that's very creatively entitled Approaches to Teaching and Learning, ATL for short. that is very research-based. And IB has asked for schools to volunteer to be pilot schools in providing feedback in this document and to design small projects as initiatives in implementing the ATL. And I am proud to say that we are one of 100 IB pilot schools. I had asked teachers for some feedback in terms of the impact of IB in their art, in their practice, and in the departments in which they teach. These are 3 pieces of feedback that I received from our IB teachers, and these could just as well be quotations out of IB literature. Clearly, from the perspective of these 3 teachers, IB is doing exactly what IB aspires to do for our students. I had alluded to some of the affective successes of the program. You can see in one of those pictures a graduate from last year painting a mural that's right outside of our black box. That was one of her CAS projects. Through CAS, the Creativity Action Service component, we've had open mics, we've had poetry readings, we've had students creating their own artwork for displays. There are a lot of contributions to the school community that have happened through the CAS component of the program. In terms of the future of the program, I don't have a crystal ball, but I would like to think that we're likely to continue to grow. And the question then becomes, well, how are we going to handle that? Within the context of the diploma program, we could certainly add courses that would enrich the experience of our students. And I'll be coming back to you soon to talk about 2 courses that I'm proposing that we add. One is called French A Literature, and quite honestly, we have to, for a variety of reasons. That's the topic of another conversation. We kind of have to add that course. And we'll also be talking about an IB theater course that I'm really excited about. Within a broader context, we have the diploma program offered by the International Baccalaureate Organization. If there is appetite for expanding our international education offerings, there are 2 other programs that IB does have. The Middle Years Program, or MYP, which is a feeder program to the diploma program, born in 1994. And then in 1997, IB basically said, well, why don't we create a feeder program for our feeder program? And thus the PYP, or the Primary Years Program, was born. So the combination of PYP, MYP, DP creates a continuum of international education throughout the world in 146 different countries. If there's interested in discussing the possibility of pursuing any of this, I'm happy to be part of those discussions. Thank you very much, and I'm also happy to answer any questions.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Mr. O'Brien. It was just as interesting having recently heard it, and it was the topic of a recent curriculum meeting, and so I know that there were many of the board members who were at the curriculum meeting who had the opportunity to engage over a longer period of time with you, but I'm sure that there are other board members, or even ones who are already part of the conversation, who might have some questions or comments. Sure, Jerry.
Thanks very much for that exciting presentation.
Absolutely.
Just 2 quickies. What percentage of the students are international?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't have an answer.
Because you alluded to
Right.
it's especially attractive to them.
I don't have a number for that. Part of the reason is that there are families that have moved here perhaps 4, 5, 6 years or so ago, so that the kids have been in our system for a while. That doesn't make them any less international, and they may very well have selected this community because they would anticipate their kids going into IB. I am much more cognizant, I guess, of the most recent arrivals. I would say of our current junior class, probably easily 10 to 15% have a background that is international in flavor.
In looking at the list of universities, there are a number of international universities listed. Are those exclusively students who are from overseas who go back to school, or do we have any American? Yes?
Yes, we do. Most of the international schools are exactly what you had just alluded to, the kids, quote unquote, returning back to their homeland. Although in some cases, for example, we have a student now who's a French student who's planning to go to study in the UK, and she's applying to schools in the UK. So is she returning home? No. But she is using the IB diploma to be able to go to another country that she wouldn't have necessarily been able to access otherwise. There are several of our, and I'm thinking several too, that are coming to mind, of our local homegrown, so to speak, students who chose to study abroad because they could.
Interesting. And the last question, when students fail, I'm looking at the diploma rate slide. When students fail to get their diploma after all of those thousands of hours of study, testing, et cetera, projects, what is the reason that they fail to get their diploma?
That varies substantially. In some cases, it's, believe it or not, failure to complete CAS. That's happened on several occasions. Lisa Celebre, who is our CAS supervisor, the person who runs CAS and the extended essay, always uses the analogy of it's like you're running in this marathon, you're almost at the finish line, and then you just decide to collapse. But we have had some students fail to get the diploma because of CAS. In other cases, it's because they haven't you get the diploma if you average 4s basically on a scale of 1 to 7 across 6 courses. So if students just simply don't get those scores or the correct combination of scores to yield the diploma, that's it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Certainly.
Mr. Bryan, I was going to ask you, with your special needs students, are those students of families that are from outside of the United States coming in, or are there students that are just here and you want to stimulate their interest in learning, or
Most of our students with special learning needs are our local Lower Merion students. That's not always the case. And sometimes it's interesting sort of seeing what the legality is in other countries, because we had, and I don't want to be too specific in mentioning countries and whatnot, but we have had cases where a student would come in and say, I've had these accommodations in my homeland, and we would ask, okay, great, we need to look at documentation, and there would be no documentation at all. It was just, oh, you want these accommodations? We'll give them to you. But that's seldomly the case. In most cases, the students with special learning needs who participate in the program are our Lower Merion School District students.
Hi, I apologize that I did not hear the curriculum committee presentation, so these questions may have already come up.
No worries at all.
But one question, when you were talking about the enrollment of students of color, it's my understanding, but I want to clarify if this is in fact true or just the student perception, that there is no equivalent of MAP or POWER for IB students, and might that not be impacting that minority achievement program, that students who are currently in that at LM or at Harriton have to choose to not participate in that if they are in IB?
We have several students of color currently in the program who are active members of POWER.
Okay, so that might be something, at least at Lower Merion, there's a perception that they would have to forego that opportunity. So you might want to get the word out to those potential students.
Yeah, that's an inaccurate perception, because POWER nor the Becton Scholars Program prevent students or make it difficult for them to be in any program. But I do say that there was a conversation several weeks ago about that perception, and we cleared it up in a meeting with parents who asked that question, and that was either a miscommunication or misunderstanding in terms of how the program works.
Yes, thank you for clearing that up. This is the first time that I had even heard that that was out there.
One of the challenges that
you.
we face about LM kids going is once kids are acclimated to one school, that they're very reluctant to change schools.
Absolutely.
So I don't know what the last couple of years look like in terms of transfers. I mean, we do try to encourage kids who might have an interest in IB to make that decision after grade 8, but
Right.
it's not, they may not necessarily be focused on it or as knowledgeable as they could be, or the parents may not be as knowledgeable as they could be.
That's exactly right. In terms of students from Lower Merion coming over, the current senior class has 2 girls who transferred from LM between sophomore and junior year. The current junior class, nobody. That number has varied anywhere from 0 to 4 for students coming between sophomore and junior year. Now, students choosing to come to Harriton because IB is on their radar going into 9th grade, that's another scenario, and students do choose to do that. I do presentations in every Western Civ class at Lower Merion, so the information is there. But it's a typical 15, 16-year-old child is not going to say, yay, I'm going to leave all of my friends because there's really cool academic program down the road. But we're here with open arms for anybody who wants to do that.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Sir.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. O'Brien.
My pleasure.
To that point, in terms of our encouraging our middle schoolers to know about IB, I know you have the information sessions and you do those several times a year, but are you aware of anything that's going on in the middle school so that students do have it on their radar?
Absolutely.
And they can start making decisions, sooner rather than later?
Your timing is perfect because I just recently emailed the principals of the 2 middle schools. Every year I visit, I do a presentation to the 8th grade class. Presentation sounds awfully formal. It's a very informal discussion of what IB is about. It's actually framed in the context of what's unique at Harriton, and I go with the coordinator of the dual enrollment program for our Penn State Brandywine program at Harriton. So it's a discussion of these are the things that are unique about Harriton that might want you to put Harriton on your radar. I do that in both of the 2 middle schools. I have a follow-up discussion specifically with the Voices of Change program at Bala Cynwyd. I email the HSA presidents of the middle schools and offer my availability, although I haven't done that yet this year. I will be soon. Offer my availability to come to an HSA meeting.
Great.
So there are things that happen.
And you talked about the students stretching themselves or taking risks to enroll in IB, and you talked about some of the supports. Could you talk about how students who are taking that academic risk to enroll in IB are supported throughout the course of that experience for non-traditional students?
Sure, certainly. It's a team approach. It's a lot of meetings with the student, engaging the family, meeting with the counselor, meeting with teachers. Sometimes just sitting down and teaching overt organization skills, because often it's just not knowing how to keep track of everything that has to be done. Teaching students how to sort of chunk larger assignments and give themselves their own sort of fake deadlines for the smaller pieces and to celebrate those victories. Often, I mean, one of the philosophical focuses of professional development has been the use of formative assessment and summative assessment, using formative assessment in the way that it's intended to be used so that as we recognize that all students can learn, just not all students learn in the same ways and at the same pace, using formative assessment the way it's supposed to be used, so that what ultimately matters is the learning.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I just wanted to say, in 10 years on the board and even before that, hearing you give these presentations, both as a board member and as a parent 3 different times, IB could not have a more enthusiastic spokesman.
Thank you very much.
Your energy and commitment to the program is truly contagious, and I want to thank you for that and for the interest that you show in our students that inspire them to enter and sustain enrollment in the program. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very kind. Thank you.
Okay. Just a quick question. In your IB in a nutshell, you talk about all the different pieces of it, but one thing that I think is very unique to IB, which you didn't touch on, which might be a valuable thing to talk about, is their approach to assessments and how you're evaluated both in the homeschool and for consistency's sake abroad. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Assessment takes many different flavors in IB. Certainly teachers generate their own assessments consistent with IB philosophy, and those result in Harriton High School grades that IB never sees, but it's what shows up on report cards and transcripts and whatnot. Formal IB assessment, the point of comparison tends to be AP, because that's what most people are familiar with. AP courses are assessed with a single exam that students take in May, and that generates a score on a scale of 1 to 5. IB assessment has a comprehensive exam at the end of the 1-year or 2-year course, but in addition to that, there are what IB calls internal assessments as opposed to the external assessment, which is the examination that's scored by an external examiner. Internal assessments consists of tasks that are designed by IB that the teachers carry out according to IB's very specific, detailed rules. The IB teacher grades that according to IB's standards. And how do our teachers know how to do that? Because they're trained to do that. That's why IB training is required in order to be able to run the program. Those tasks, for example, in music, Students can choose to be a solo performer, a member of a group performer, or they can choose to write their own compositions. That's internally assessed by our teacher. In English, in the Language A course, there's a conversation that the student has with the teacher that's audio recorded about an extract of literature, and that's scored by the teacher. Well, how does IB know that we're treating our kids fairly, that we're not being either too harsh or too soft on our students? Once the teachers give me the internal assessment scores, I report them to IB through IB's intranet. I'm then given a list of students whose work needs to be submitted to IB. The IB organization has moderators stationed throughout the world that will then look at our students' work and our teachers' grading of our students' work, and then determine if we're holding our students to the international standards of 146 different countries. If our teacher is being a little bit too harsh, all scores based on that moderated sample are raised. If our teachers are being a little bit too easy, all scores based on that moderated sample are lowered. And then that contributes to the student's IB score. Now, those moderators are moderated as well. So there's a sampling of all moderators' moderated marks that get to like a super moderator. So, and the super moderator has big S none. So yeah, I mean, it's a very comprehensive structure to support the assessment component.
Just as an anecdote, I have a friend who used to teach at several different IB schools overseas, and I can remember getting an email. Oh, hey, I got an LM paper to assess this year, and it was just very funny from around the other side of the world. A friend was like, "Oh, I got an LM paper to do."
I will say that several of our teachers have become IB examiners, so they get packages. Imagine this: a teacher who's probably been grading enough now gets a package in the mail from some country and is going to sit down and start grading. A lot of the grading is now moving to an online interface. So we have teachers who are logging onto IB's secure website and grading examination papers from students in 146 different countries.
I had maybe a follow-up to Diane's question. Sure. Could you comment or tell us a little bit in particular about the extended essay? Because again, I hear this from students, so I'm not sure of the accuracy of the whisper down the lane, but their perception is that they don't actually get feedback on the extended essay often until after they've graduated. And is there some way to alter that process so that they can actually, that can be part of their learning experience?
It depends on how the word feedback is being defined. The student ultimately gets a single score from IB, and that's the case in all subjects, including the extended essay. That score is available to students through an online interface on July 6th every year. The summer after they've graduated, much like AP scores are not available until the summer afterwards. During the process of writing the extended essay, the students are working with a faculty member with expertise in that discipline. And that faculty member does provide feedback to the student on his or her research and writing along the way. So students do get feedback, but official feedback from IB, they get a single letter grade, A, B, C, D, or E.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you again. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Tom. We do appreciate it. We know you have an early morning, so we only have one more report. If you could hang just in case a member of the public has a comment.
I'm more than happy to hang.
Thank you. I think everyone's aware that this year we were required by the state to implement a new teacher effectiveness model, and part of the accountability structure that's being implemented by this governor's administration also includes a new model for the evaluation of administrators, and Dr. Marseille is going to talk about new and exciting gifts from the Department of Education.
Thank you. I'm going to be brief, and I wanted to, my first 6 slides are part of a presentation that Ms. Schaefer and I presented to you in June of last academic school year that talked about Act 82 and its impact that it was going to have on our teacher effectiveness or evaluation system. And part of that legal framework talked about the way in which there were specific components in which the state has identified how teachers were going to be evaluated. And data was a major part of that. And the other 4 components around planning, preparation, instruction, professional responsibilities was one piece of the pie, and the other piece of the pie was really around performance data, which we are currently implementing this academic school year, where a certain percentage of a teacher's evaluation is based on data, which is the school performance profile. 15% of a teacher's overall rating is based on our school performance profile that we presented to the board, or Mr. Cody did as a follow-up. Here is a representation of that pie that we spoke about, that parts of that are already in place. The other parts will move along the 14, 15, 16 school year. But currently this year, 85% of a teacher's evaluation is based on the observation, which is the Danielson framework. The other 15 is based on the score that their building received on the school performance profile. We talked a lot about the importance of the impact that good teaching has on instruction, which is one of the major factors why PD moved towards this new evaluation model. But the reality is that while we engage in national conversation about the impact of teachers, we'd be remiss not to think about the importance that principals bring to the instructional component, and principals' ability to engage in meaningful critical dialogue around what accomplished teaching looks like, and be able to not only model but monitor and support teachers through that process. And reports and research talks about how though the teacher is one of the primary biggest impacts on student achievement, the role of the principal is not that far behind in terms of leading instruction. So the state, as part of Act 82, in the 14-15 school year, will be implementing a new evaluation system for principals that is very similar to the teacher effectiveness model that we currently are operating and that we briefed you on. And they're really focusing on this part of the pie, which really has a conversation around not just the observational, what we can see, in terms of those 4 domains, but a lot of it is going to play on data as well for the 14-15 school year. And these 4 domains, very similar to the 4 domains around the Danielson framework, provides very specific language around the 4 domains on what principals are going to be evaluated on. And here, which is for the audience might be very difficult to see, is very similar to the rubric that teachers are currently under, where there are 4 categories: failing, needs improvement, proficient, and distinguished. There are components under each domain, which I will show you briefly. And under domain 1, there are several components that speak to what does it mean to be a leader, around strategic and cultural leadership. What does system leadership looks like? How do you manage a building effectively? What are the ways in which you've ensured and prioritized school safety? So the idea about this new evaluation model is that it has very specific language around 4 core areas that they call domains, that principals are going to have to provide evidence of their leadership. Domains 3 and 4 is the same process as well, as it takes principals through what are ways in which you are ensuring that the curriculum is being implemented in your building, what are ways in which you're looking at aligning assessments across the board, and what evidence do you provide that you are leading conversation with parents and the community with regards to systemic leadership. Like the teachers, there is a final rating tool that is an Excel document that is pre-populated that we shared with you, that is closely going to mirror the teacher's rubric or the teacher's rating tool as well. So what we have been doing, what we continue to do. Last year, we began an extensive conversation over the summer during our leadership seminar on what does it mean to lead instructional conversations? How do you engage in more critical conversation with teachers around practice? How do you ask probing questions to help teachers become more reflective around their work? We are going to be partnering up with Montgomery County Intermediate Unit to speak to get more professional learning opportunities for principals as we navigate this process. They are intently engaged in a self-monitored web-based application that takes them through 30 hours of teacher evaluations that provide inter-array reliability, very similar to the IB program where these videos have been rated by a series of experts. Our scores, or the principal scores, are compared to the scores of those experts to ensure that, indeed, when you walk into a classroom, everyone is having the same language around what good teaching looks like. We are putting in place opportunities during our academic council sessions, our principal meetings, to engage in more critical dialogue so that July 1st of 2014, when this takes effect, our principals are well prepared to meet the challenges of the new the evaluation system. So a lot of challenges in terms of getting acclimated to the new teacher system, but at the same time, we need to provide our principals with the same level of professional learning as the 14-15 school year will demand more of them with regards to the instructional outcomes and rubrics that are designed. So we will continue to keep you updated, but we wanted to share with you some of the conversation that will be taking place in the during this school year in preparation for that new evaluation model. If there's any questions, I can take that.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, board members?
Dr. Marcy, I'm just interested in knowing with this new model, with the principals being offered opportunity to learn and to become proficient and what they have to do with the teachers, how is that going to impact the overall learning that's going on right in the building? If the principals are being taught, or they're, with the MCIU, if they're having leadership opportunities to learn themselves, what is going on with the teachers that they're administrating?
Sure. Well, I think I want to say that our primary focus for our principals has always been around instructional leadership. What we've tried to do is come up with a common language on what that looks like across all 10 buildings. So when we began the critical work of how do you engage in language that supports learning, and how do you probe teachers where you're asking teachers to dive deeper into the reflective practice. And that's what we've been doing the last couple of years. We've increased our number of walkthroughs where principals are navigating their calendar, as crazy as it is, to have a much more critical eye on that process. The new evaluation system, if there's some merit to this rating, like rank and files, which unfortunately does that, but I think the benefit of that is that our new evaluation system for teachers requires much more in-depth conversation. It requires more face time. It requires principals to engage in more reflective conversation about teachers' intent, teachers' outcome around their instructional practice. So we've been building up to this phase prior to the state's Act 82, where we've been asking principals to take a look at a course of your academic day with everything that you have to do, knowing that your primary focus is around instructional practice. How do we leverage your calendar so that you're maximizing those limited hours and getting into as many classrooms as possible in meeting with teachers to talk about instruction? So we've been doing that. for some time. This, for me, is just what I believe to be a compliance piece of the state with much more specific language that we've been talking about was not specific with regards to the domains or the components that the state has identified will specifically be in a principal's evaluation.
I would add, I think we've actually been very strong on the leadership for learning component over the last few years because we saw that as essential, and we wanted to improve the quality of feedback that teachers were receiving even before this new model came in. So I think we're good there, and then we're good on elements of some of the other areas. But in terms of systems leadership, I think that's an area where we have not provided really enough training, and I don't think that affects the day-to-day operation of the school as much as this visioning of the future and you know, where are we going and how do we make sure that we're maximizing opportunities for students with the resources that we have. That's an area that I think needs attention in this new framework. So it's not the framework that you know I would have designed or we would have designed, but it is a useful framework in kind of mapping out a set of expectations. And we've actually looked at some other leadership frameworks that we think are a little more focused and a little more progressive, for want of a better term. I don't want to use aggressive in terms of making things better faster, but we do think that there are some other models that we can learn from. But we're pretty pleased with how our administrators are engaging in conversations around the quality of instruction.
Are we limited then to these domains? And what comes to mind for me is the extensive work around cultural proficiency, for example. Where would that fall under domain one? So do we have some latitude in terms of the kinds of things that make a principal in Lower Merion School District special and what we're looking for?
I think cultural proficiency cuts across all of these domains. Okay. So we're not limited. We're not banned from going in directions that we need to go in. I think that there are places where we can where it connects most naturally, and then there are other places where we need to kind of raise the profile. Okay. So I mean that work continues. It continues in terms of setting high expectations for all students, engaging families. It's in there, okay. And we need to continue to work on it. The reason why we like some of the other leadership frameworks is that it's more explicitly stated in some other places. So the one from the National Board of Professional Teaching Standards, yes. They have a framework that we think is a little more focused on the areas of leadership that fit with our expectations for what a principal does here now.
Can I just quickly, because I have a follow-up question, I don't want to run on the, so in terms of the vice principals then, at the upper grades, where do they fit in on this? Are they evaluated? Yes. How does that work?
Our challenge is really not at the school level administration. This framework fits for principals and assistant principals, and while the state requirement is for principals, we see assistant principals as having that same set of responsibilities. They as a team share that set of responsibilities. Right, so okay. This needs to be the same instrument. What the state really hasn't provided us with are ways to assess the work of other administrators that are not school-based. So there were references earlier, Tom made one to Mr. Mitchell, the STEM supervisor. So there isn't a framework from the state that fits there. And there are unique roles even with the teacher framework that, where certain roles don't fit. And so I expect over time some of those will be modified by the state or piloted by the state. And if not, we'll be looking to model our evaluation systems for the other employees who are administrators but not school-based administrators, so that it at least philosophically follows the same formula. Thank you.
Marissa, please.
I think this is along the lines of Robin and Melissa's questions, but maybe a little more general. Does this rubric enhance principal autonomy, or do you think it constrains principal autonomy, their kind of discretion to lead in their own ways?
Well, I oftentimes look at these frameworks, personally for me as the floor, is the minimum competency in terms of areas in which principals need to think more critically about. It is not in any way details every piece of their work. Very similar to the conversation around cultural proficiency, is that there are a large number of district initiatives that we feel are important, not as just a district, but to a community, that we want to make sure our principals are practicing on a daily basis. And yes, we will follow the minimum standard that the state has put out for administrators. But I think the way in which you deliver that gives you some autonomy, more so. But I think that the language is a little bit more specific around some of those domains and some of those components where it hasn't been before. But we believe that we've been engaged in this rich conversation around system change, which we need to spend more time in, around culture and around the other domains as well.
So in your view, there's still wiggle room?
Oh yeah,
beyond this?
absolutely. It does not lock an administrator within those sets of domains. It asks you to complete that.
But when you wiggle here, we'd like you to wiggle along with your partner at the same school at the other level. So there are things that we say this is a really important priority for the district. Now, middle school principal A and middle school principal B, figure out how to do this with the talent and expertise in your building, what you bring to the table, what your teachers bring to the table, and how your kids interact with that. We don't want to get back to the place where we have 6 elementary schools doing 6 very different things. But we're really fine with saying to elementary principals, figure this out and then make it work so that it's very similar across the 6 elementary schools. And we've done some undoing of too much autonomy for individual schools in the last several years.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Jerry?
We have the principal effectiveness system in Act 82. Then later on in the presentation, you talk about the rating tool will be developed. Is that something, not following what that is versus the system that's kind of laid out in Act 82?
Sure.
And is this a local system or is this a state system?
It's a state system.
That we haven't gotten yet?
No, we have not. But if we recall on the presentation we did for the teacher effectiveness, there's a series of cells within an Excel document that the state has pre-populated and has configured what those formulas are. Very similar to Domain 1 in planning and preparation, a principal, an administrator, or teacher will be given a score of 0 to 3, for example. Once that is populated, it calculates a raw number. And at the end of inputting all these 0s, 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, maybe, then at the end it spits out an overall number, telling you whether you are failing, whether you need improvement, you're proficient, or you are distinguished. I have not seen a copy of that rating tool. We are told that it will mirror the current rating tool that teachers are currently being evaluated in this school year.
So it goes on to say that your slide, final ratings and all supporting evidence documentation for individuals will be kept at the local level. So
yes,
this along with like the so-called wiggle room this is what will be the basis for evaluating our principals and assistant principals and other administrators, correct?
Yes, but the next line is also the aggregate rating information.
Well, I was going to ask about that. So it gets reported to PD in the aggregate for what purpose?
The aggregate is that actual tool. So the aggregate is what you're going to report to the state. The evidence that principals bring to you in terms of if there was a observation meeting and we're meeting with principals, we're asking, show me evidence in which you provided leadership in Domain 1. They're going to bring documentation, they're going to bring data. All those are internal documents. After we've had that conversation and I fill out that Excel document with a pre-formulated basis, I give a raw score. That information or that raw template that gives a 0 to 3 or 0 to 4 is what we send to the state. That's the aggregate data.
And then what does the state do with it? And does this ever get reported in any way, whether on an individual or a group basis?
That's some of that we do not yet know. So I mean, the idea behind collecting the information is to monitor the quality of school principal, school leadership performance, but we're not sure where it goes from there.
And same question for the teacher reporting. Do we know yet where that's going on an aggregate basis, a school by school basis at the state level?
No, on an aggregate level, we submit the overall rating form after it's completed to the state. With regards to how and where that is housed and what they do with that, I'm unable to answer that. The evidence that teachers bring to accumulate that score is kept internally.
Understood.
The final rating tool is submitted to the state, if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Schaefer.
Under federal law, the Department of Education has the responsibility to monitor the performance of school districts. Student performance is the ultimate measure, but all these other components contribute to student performance. So in an ideal situation, this would all become a way to go back to a district to help with an intervention plan. But there are very few schools where the state actually intervenes, and thankfully none of them are here. And the extent to which they use data beyond student data is not real clear in that process. But they have an obligation to monitor school success.
Okay, I was also wondering if in this world where everything gets pushed out to the public, if there is an intention to report this on some basis, some aggregated basis.
We're not aware of that, but once data is aggregated across the state, certainly becomes subject to right to know, and things that we aren't anticipating being public could become public.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Okay, at this time, I'd like to ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak on any issue. If you could please come up and sign in with Ms. LaPera, the usual 3 minutes, and saying your name and where you live. We would appreciate it.
I'm trying to for you. Let me know if it.
Stand on a ladder. Stand up here. It's okay. I can yell. It's okay. I taught school. I can yell. Two comments. One is the
Can you please?
Ruth Jenkins.
I know we all know you, but can you please? Thank you.
The art demonstration from Gladwin was really very lovely, impressive. It was implied that it was a 60-minute art class. Is it one class or is it twice a week of 30 minutes?
It's 60 minutes each week. Sometimes it's 30 for the younger grades, and then a 60
Then a full
block
hour for the older grades.
kids.
Okay. And my other comment is with the IB program, which is, one of the very exciting things that goes on here in Lower Merion that falls outside of the box, the proverbial educational box. And when the comprehensive planning committee gets together, I think that they should really tap Mr. O'Brien's skills and talents to really do things that are a little bit outside of the norm and less technologically directed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anybody else who's coming up. Okay. Well, with that, we are adjourned. Good evening, everyone.